Okay, this should be the third video you are watching. If you have not watched 2 videos previous to this, stop, go back. This video is value mapping. So we're going to take what we have as far as the structure of the flower, and we're going to start deciding where the darks go, where the lights go, so that when we do shade, there's not a lot of thinking involved. We've got it kind of prepared. Okay, so with value mapping, I usually recommend people just start with what you can see the easiest. So for me, I think all of the shading is really well defined. So I think that's going to be pretty easy for me. Like, you can see that this dark corner is pretty much all in shadow. And there's a couple different values here. There's really dark, there's sort of a medium, and then there's this highlight. So I kind of like to map out as much as I can, especially for beginners. The more you can prepare, the better. Okay, so all of this, and I'm going to label this, you can if you want. I'm just going to label it like a 3. Okay, so if I have values 1, 2, and 3, 3 being in the darkest. Okay, and then going in there, I have this sort of, and you can draw, it's sort of like a, I'll draw darker here. Okay, a big oval highlight. Okay, so this would be 2, that would be 1. And again, you don't have to mark those on your sketch if you don't want to. Okay. Ooh, I see a little layout issue too. Alright, so moving on to this section, see, this is sort of like a really flat football shape or flat eye shape here. And on mine, it kind of curves and continues, so that's something I'm going to edit real quick before I move forward. So I'm just going to take this and arc this into here, and then get rid of this. Okay, so that will help fix our shape. Okay, adjust it if you need to. Okay, alright, so there's that. So within that, it sort of goes, again, 1, 2, 3, very dark at the edge. So, okay. Alright, so it's sort of like a circle within a circle, sort of like an elongated target. 1, 2, 3. Alright, and then moving up to here, this line that turns into a shaded area, we kind of have that started already. So basically everything within this section is shaded. So all of this is going to be mapped out, but there is this sort of triangular shape that's darker than the rest. So I'm just going to get that in there. Okay, so it's sort of like a 3. All of this, I think from the middle of this over, is like a 2. Okay, and then we can just carry this over, and it sort of fades out here. Okay, so let's see. All of this section is like a 1.5. It's not quite white, but it does have some shading up there. So everything from here to here. You might need to redefine some edges so you can see what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, it's like a 1.5. Okay, and then I do see there is some shading all along the edge of here, so this is bright, but then around here it gets darker again, so I'm just going to mark that out. Okay, and it may seem like a lot of work to do all this value mapping, but it really, when you come to shading, trying to shade soft and the right value is hard enough without having to think about where it should go. So I do think it is worth the time. Okay, as far as the stamen, the whole thing is shaded, but it is a little darker on the right side than the left. So I'm going to sort of draw a dividing line. That could be like a 3, this could be like a 2, and this is all just starter work. And then along here I think is also like a 2. Okay. Okay. Now, and with the stem, it's sort of like drawing a tube. It's going to be darker on the edges, lighter in the middle, so we don't necessarily need to map that out. If you want, you can do another smaller tube on the inside for what you don't want to shade, but we can get to that. Alright, so I think we got most of the shading done. The background is a big thing here. The white's going to pop out against our dark background, but that will be the last, because anything you do on the outside of the page you want to save to last so you don't accidentally smear it as your hand's sitting on the page. Okay? So where you start is sort of up to you. You can start with what you see the clearest, or you can start based on if you're left-handed or right-handed. You know, if you're left-handed, you might want to start on the side so you can work your way across. But really, there's no rule. I kind of jump around a little bit so I can keep it balanced. So I like to start with some of my darkest areas just so they pop most. So these 2 areas I think are a smart place to start. So getting that in, I'll try and keep this on here. Okay, so now you're going to be shading along with me, so I may or may not talk this entire time, but more of just watch what I do. Okay, when you're shading, direction is really important. So you can see the pencil strokes on here, so follow that. So starts sideways, starts to turn vertical. Pay attention to things like that, especially with things that have texture. It makes a big difference. If you're shading the wrong direction, a lot of times it just doesn't look right. You may not be able to put your finger on why it looks weird, but you're going to know it's not right. Okay, so as I cross over in this 2 section, I'm just putting less pressure on the pencil. If you labeled all this light enough, you won't need to erase your lines, so just cover right over them. But if you did make a really dark value map, you might need to erase these borders as you go. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm altering my direction based on what I see here. This has kind of a heavy outline, so I am going to go through. I'm not going to press really super hard. I can always darken it later, but I am going to get it dark enough that I can see it pretty clearly. Okay, and then this middle section was pretty dark. Okay, filling that in. Okay, this was a little bit lighter, but nothing is left white in here, so this all gets some shading. Okay. I'm going to go through and darken up a few more lines just so that I don't lose them with the shading around it, so this stays pretty dark. Okay. This was a line didn't erase well enough before. This stays pretty dark. Again, you can always make things darker when needed. Make sure you just keep following along and shading with me. And squinting is always a good tool. You know, if you have a hard time distinguishing where shading ends, if you squint at it, for me it becomes very clear that the dark part ends right here, whereas it lines up with this middle piece. So knowing that, I can go through and I can move a little swifter, getting in sort of a dark middle value, and I can kind of pause it there. Okay. Starting with this area, I always like to start dark and work my way to light. And I don't like to get too dark right away. I start and then I just keep layering until it's as dark as I need it to be. Because if you get it too dark, it's harder to erase if you go too far. So I'd rather start too light, add on. Okay. And there may be things you notice that you didn't value map as you went. So there's this sort of texture here. So I am going to throw in that dark line here for where the shading gets a little heavier. And then leave this little highlight in there. Okay. All of this should be like a 2, so that's a medium pressure. And again, there are variations, but we can also erase out some of these highlights that we're finding too. So as long as you are coloring softly and lightly, okay, twisting your pencil so you can keep that soft edge. Like I just accidentally twisted and had a hard line there. So find those soft edges of your pencil. You can go back to a separate sheet if you need to find it. And then if you're trying to get something really light and you can't do it without it getting streaky or something, you could also, like charcoal, use your finger and kind of smear in to fill in those edges. Okay, it'll give it a softer appearance. You may like that, or maybe you want texture. If you want texture, just keep using your pencil. Okay, so I'm going to leave that like that. Okay, and now I'm going to move into these darks here. So again, if it's a line, you can go ahead and outline it. Just don't get too heavy until you know you got it in the right spot. Okay, and again, squinting and measuring, it stays pretty dark until just before that hits it. So I can use that and say, alright, I know I can press fairly hard going up this path. And once I get close to that, I'm going to start fading out, and I'll come back to it in a minute. Okay. So I believe this video is going to call me off at 10 minutes. So I am going to stop the video here. You can pause it and then compare and refine this area if you want. I'm not completely done, but it's always good to stop and check. And then the next video, we'll just continue shading.